So what's going on YouTube? My name is Mehul. Alright, we're gonna learn about React Native, what it is, and why it is used. Basically, we'll just take a look at that in this tutorial only and just go over through some basic building blocks like doing basic stuffs like navigation and all, transitions, then some API fetching, HTTP requests, timers, and all that stuff, which basically you would need to actually create a functional React Native application. And let's start from the first question. What the heck this React Native is? Many of you might know, but some of you who do not have any idea, who have just stumbled upon here somehow on this channel and now are watching this tutorial randomly. So for you guys, what React Native is that it's a way to write cross-platform applications on JavaScript. So if you know JavaScript, then probably you can get started with React Native immediately. Because what React Native does is that it provides you a way to write JavaScript, and then React Native would turn that JavaScript into your native code. It does not really turn that into a native code if you take a look at under the hood, but let's just keep that abstracted and let's just assume that React Native somehow does some magic and turn your JavaScript code into native code. And basically, once you're done with that, your application actually runs native. So it's not running into a browser or something, which some hybrid application frameworks like Ionic do. React Native actually runs native code on your device. Plus, it's super fast to do, it's super easy to learn. You just have to learn JavaScript. If you have already learned JavaScript or you have been working with JavaScript for some time, then you're good to go, basically, for Android and iOS. Now, the downsides of React Native is that basically you cannot create almost every app with it. I usually prefer to go with React Native for smaller and quicker apps, and sometimes some big apps as well. But React Native, I guess, is not suitable for developing high-end performance things like games or something like that, because in that case, native is still the best, though React Native still compiles to native. But I guess with native, you have a lot of gears in hand to tweak the controls. We're going to discuss how to set up React Native environment and basically get started working with React Native. To get started with React Native, we need to obviously set up its environment and all that stuff first. So first things first, how do we actually set up React Native? So if you go to the official website, you can see that we have got a nice get started link here. All right, the confusion starts here. Now there are two sections you can see: quick start and building projects with native code. Now most of the people who um, dive into React Native for the first time get started with this quick start thing, which is basically just a couple of lines and you're good to go. Now, as good seems, at least for me, I think this create React Native app is not the best choice, because it runs on Expo client, which I personally do not really like, because Expo kind of limits you in a lot of things. Because React Native on its own is like you're writing JavaScript, plus you can do a lot of tweaking and all that stuff with the native code as well. But when you use something like Expo, you get bundled, right? So you are not allowed to move out of a specific realm. So if you want to go with this Expo one, you can, but I would go with native code by building projects with native code. Now, once you do this, what you have to do is obviously go ahead and have Node installed on your computer. Now, if you do not know what Node is, then let me just show you what do you actually mean by, let's say, I'm just gonna go to a directory. Let me just zoom in here a little. Let's say I go to home directory and let's just list what we have in here. Let's just say YouTube it is, and then we go with, let's just remove this React Native directory for now, and let's just create React Native again. All right, so now what you need to do basically is have Node installed, and again you can do that by following instructions here. Now make sure you select your target OS as Android for now, because obviously iOS can only be developed on a Mac, which kind of sucks, but it's okay. We are good with Android only right now. So if you're a Mac OS user, then you can install Node with Brew, or basically there's a video of mine which shows you exactly how to set up latest version of Node and NPM on your system. I'll just leave that link in the description. So if you want to set up Node or NPM, you can watch that. All right. You can skip this Watchman tool if you want. It's not really required. So once you're done with this, you need to install the React Native CLI. So to do that, again, you have to just do npm install React Native CLI, and make sure you install it globally by writing the -g flag. And since I already have that installed, I guess it should not take me a lot of time. So you can see that it's just fetched the local copy of that thing, right? And yeah, one more thing. What you want to do is make sure you run your npm around 4 point something version. This is the problem you're gonna face later on when you use your React Native applications, that you cannot really run npm on version 5. Right, so this is why I'm running version 4.6.1, because I'm using React Native to create CodeDamp's mobile app. So that's why npm version 5 is not really compatible with React Native the last time I checked. So if you face any problems and you find out that your npm version is version 5 point something or above, then what you want to do is npm install g npm and add the rate version here, right? In my case, it's 4.6.1. All right, with that being said, now once you have done that, you should have your React Native CLI on board. And after this, what you want to do is obviously have installed Android Studio. Now you need Android Studio, JDK, and all that stuff, because remember, React Native is actually developing native apps for you. So just go ahead and download the JDK, and how you do that is basically let's see, you accept the license agreement first and then select your operating system. For me, it's Mac OS X 64-bit, and just download this and run it. You should be good to go. Once you do that, just go ahead and download the Android Studio as well. Once you do download Android Studio, I already have that up and running as well. You would be provided with Android SDK platforms, and all that stuff. You would also have an Android virtual device, though I do not really recommend. You can just directly, work with your real Android device if you have one. If you don't have one, that's another thing. So you can create an Android virtual device, which we will see later on as we proceed. All right, so Android Studio is pretty straightforward. If you guys have ever worked with it, you just have to download it and it will just start downloading, right? Once you just have to install it. You do not really need to use Android Studio to work with React Native, just because Android Studio brings all that SDK stuff together. All right, once you have downloaded, just install Android Studio, and you can see that building a React Native app with native code, however, requires Android 6 Marshmallow SDK in particular. So React Native right now maybe uses Android 6 SDK. I'm not sure, because they're saying it. I believe they use that. But sure enough, you can use another targeted SDK later on in your application, because hey, remember, React Native is running native code. So if you're coming from an Android development background, you must know there's a file called Android manifest and build.cradle and all that stuff. You're going to find exact same files in your React Native project as well. So if you do not have any idea what the heck these terms are, don't worry about that. We'll gradually learn them later on. But for now, just remember that your React Native right now is targeting this Android 6 platform. And by targeting, that means that your app would be most optimized, developed for this thing. And for backward compatibility, you have to add some sort of code or something. Forward compatibility, for forward compatibility, yes, as well. So yeah. So here we are. And you do not need to really do all of this stuff. Just make sure you install this Android 6. And let me just give me a second here. All right, so you see something like this when you launch Android Studio, right? And what we actually have to do here is basically you have to go to like your Android Studio, and you would probably see something like a bunch of hello world kind of stuff here. Don't worry about that, it's not really useful. What you just have to do is just go right here to this SDK manager little boy, this Android with an arrow on his head. Just go to Android SDK Manager, Android SDK, SDK Platforms, and make sure you install this Android Marshmallow, Android 6. You see I have installed that already. Just stick on it and click OK. It will download that and install it for you. That's basically it, what you have to do for the SDK one. And you can see that we need something else as well, like Google APIs, Android SDK, which we had already done, Intel x86, Atom 64 system image, and all this stuff. And basically you would find all of that stuff right here. Inside here, SDK platforms is here, SDK tools, you can find that stuff here, right? You have to install these SDK tools as well. Then once you're done with this SDK tools thing, you see that you have installed this 23.0.1 SDK tools, and just go ahead, select these 23 point whatever latest version is. It does not matter, and click on OK. Right? Once you do all of that stuff, what you have to do next is configure these variables by adding them to your bash profile. And for the Windows guys, what you have to do is, if you go right here, you have to add it to your path, right? So how do you add it to your path? Well, for the Windows people, you have to right click on this PC icon. Then you have to go to somewhere like advanced settings of your computer. Then you would see environment variables, and then basically add those stuff. For Linux and Mac OS users, just copy this stuff and remind me tomorrow. Just copy this stuff and go ahead, and inside your terminal right here, just open your bash profile, or no, bash, well, bash profile it is, right? So just open your bash profile file and just copy and paste this stuff right here, which we see inside. So you would have set up your all those variables. For Windows guys, again, as I told you, just have to go to system settings and basically add environment variables. Just Google how to add environment variables and you should be good to go. Right, once you're done with all of that stuff, right, what you have to do is go to your project in which you want to actually write code of your Android application and iOS application. In my case, this is code damn to React Native, and right here you have to say React Native in it and then your project name. Let's just name it Hello World and hit enter. Now you can see that it creates a kind of a walkthrough kind of thing. So you see that it's installing all the required packages. It's using yarn for right now, but you can make use of npm as well. They mostly work in a similar way on a package.json file. So anyway, yeah, so let me just grab this and pick it right here. You can see that we just did React Native init, our project name. Then you can actually do all of the stuff later on. It's not really required right now. I'll tell you how to do this. This is all cool, right? So what you have to do right now, first of all, is just make sure this thing right here goes well. And if it does not go well, then go ahead and repeat the steps. Make sure you have added the environment variables correctly. Windows guys, you have to add it to your path variables inside your this PC settings, advanced settings, environment variables, and then selecting path variables. You can easily see how to do that by selecting this Windows here. See, just like that. Open system pane, system security, change settings, advanced tab, environment variables, click on new, and just like that. Right, Mac and Linux guys, I hope you can do it yourself because you have been working on with bash and all that stuff. At least I believe Linux people at least work with that stuff all the time. So you just have to copy and paste this inside your bash profile, and this is bash RC basically on a Linux system, bash profile on a Mac system. And once you have done that and still the error is there, then there might be some problem with installation of your Android Studio, SDK, and all that stuff. Make sure to check all of that as well. And if still the error persists, then you can ask that in comments, and I'll be just happy to help you. So let me just really quickly wait here for it to complete. And it might take a little bit time for you for the first time, because in my case it might be fetching a lot of stuff from the cache itself, but for you it would be downloading all that stuff. So you see that looks like I am already done. Alright, you can see that it's set up on my end, and hopefully should be set up on yours as well. And basically that's it for this video, and in the next video I'm just gonna show you a very basic hello world with React Native, which is basically just already prepared for us. We just need to run an emulator and fire it up. I'm gonna go over through basic file system and how React actually organizes its files so that it's easier to work for you later on with the application folder structure and all that stuff. So let's get into it. Alright, so coming to the file structure, what we have right here for React Native is that if we see something like this, if we start from the top, you would see that we have two folders, which is Android and iOS. Now these are basically the only folders you would spend most of your time in, right? Because Android consists of the files which are used to build the application for Android platform, and similarly on the similar basis iOS is used. You can see all these Xcasset files if you're coming from an Xcode background, so these files would be familiar to you. So these are basically the files for the iOS stuff, right? And for Android, you can see that inside the app we have build.gradle file, as I told you earlier on. Then inside src we also have the manifest file, which is basically the same thing as if you're working with Android Studio, right? So these are the two folders which will be looking all along this series, so I'm just gonna skip over them right now. And coming to node modules, obviously because it's running on JavaScript, we can have our additional modules with us, and which would be installed inside the node modules folder. And once the app is compiled, then all of that stuff would be basically just managed by React. You do not need to worry about that. Then comes the Babel RC file, which is just the file consisting of one line for now, just sets the preset to React Native, nothing fancier here. Then this is bug config file. This is not really required because there's a system called bug build, something used by Facebook, but we're not going to make use of this, so we do not really need to know what's going on with this file, right? So on a similar basis, this is flow config file. Then we have the git files, so that you can actually just check out your project to a GitHub repository as well. So these are the files which would help you. Then again, watchman configuration file, nothing fancier here. Then comes the app.js file, right? So app.js file, if you see here, you would see something familiar, right? Now when we would run the application, you would see that basically the things you see here are the ones which you see on the app. So you see that it kind of looks like HTML, but not really. View text looks like this is HTML, but it looks like we are making use of some native elements, right? Like the view container, the text container, all that stuff. So we'll come to that later on. Then we have the app.json file, which just consists of the name and stuff like that related to your application. Pretty handful stuff. So the next thing is index.js, and basically this is the file which bootstraps your application, right? So this is the first file which React Native enters. So yeah, you can see that we are importing the app from here, the same file here. We're importing it into index.js, and we are just registering the component with the app, right? Then our package.json is obviously the file which consists of all the dependencies and all that fancier stuff. So that's all for this video, I guess, and file structure is quite simple for React Native. Not much of things going on. So that's all for this video, and in the next video I'm going to show you how we can run this dummy project on a real Android device for now. In this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to set up your Android device correctly so that your builds are happening and basically you're just ready to go and code. So let's get started. Alright, so this would be a hello world tutorial. So let's just go ahead and create one. So now if you take a look inside the code, what I want you to do first of all, before actually starting off with the hello world, just go to your Android folder and just go to this local.properties file. If this does not exist, then create this file, right? Once you create this file, I want you to determine what operating system you're running, and hopefully you know that, I believe. And if you do know, then just go ahead and choose one of the lines which is according to your operating system. So right now I'm running OS X, so I'm just gonna keep this line and move the other two, right? And just save this. Basically this file is just telling the React Native where the SDK is located for Android, right? And once you do that, basically we are good to go. So now you can just go to app.js and change this to hello world with just some text. This is again not an error because VS Code is just complaining that this should be in a TypeScript file, not a JS file. Not a problem really, but it's okay. So there we are, and once you're done with that, just go ahead to your terminal and write React Native run Android and hit enter. Now I have my personal Android device connected right here, if you can see this one, right? So we can just wait for this build to complete, and then I would actually be able to run this application on my real Android device, which is this thing right here. You can see I can move this around with my finger without actually touching the screen, right? So here we are, and let React Native build the application. And meanwhile, what I can do is inside another tab right here, I can say React Native run iOS, and simulator would be iPhone 8 Plus. Now you cannot do this if you are running anything other than Mac OS X, because iOS development unfortunately can only be done on Apple devices. So once you do that, you can see that I already have my terminal, my simulator running with me. So there we are. Let's just wait for both of these to complete. Now this might take quite some time for first time building, but subsequent builds would be faster, right? This is because this just needs to set up all that stuff first of all, and then later on it could be faster. And if you see right here, this gets opened, right? Now what the heck is this? Well, this is a Metro Builder bundler, and this opens for Android, right? And what this means is that whenever you change some files, some JavaScript files, where your application needs to inform, let's just say your phone, or maybe your phone needs to inform that, yeah, something is building, right? So this is done by this thing. So you just need to keep this open in the background, and you can see the progress of building bundling the device right now. And on my Android device as well, if you can see that, we get a message that loading from localhost port 881. So yeah, that's basically what's happening right now. And if we see iOS builds, well, some sort of stuff is going on here. Let's just not disturb this thing, and let's just get back to our Android build stuff. Alright, you can see that our Android bundler is 100% done. So let's just see what's up on my screen. Hey, it's Hello World from React Native. So you can see this is a truly native application running on your device, on your Android phone right now, coded in JavaScript, right? And this is a real Android device. Actually real, because I'm just mirroring my phone on the Mac OS. The iPhone build seems to take some time, but it's okay. Let's just wait for it to build. Okay, so looks like we got it. So it says this build succeeded, and it also installed and launched. So let's just see how it's looking like. So you can see that it's now our bundler is again bundling the iOS app, and let's just wait for it to complete loading. Alright, you can see that we get a nice little hello world in the center of the screen on our iOS device as well. So if you take a look, and if I just bring this down, you can see that we are running the same piece of code on two different operating systems using React Native. That's the power of React Native. We're going to discuss about how the Hello World program actually works, and in general how React Native overall works. So let's get started. So in this video, let's just see how the Hello World, which we had coded earlier, is actually working. Alright, so if we come to our Android project, right now, as I said, app.js is the only point of entry right now. Basically, the point of entry is index.js, but it's just index.js actually includes the app file here, so we can just say like that. And we can actually just get rid of this props right here and replace it something like this. And I'm just gonna explain in a minute what these props are. Not in a minute, but maybe in next tutorial, but we'll just go through over what's happening here. So before starting this web series, I believe that you have at least the basic knowledge of how ES6 and stuff like that actually is working, because if you do not know about that, then it would be kind of difficult for you to follow along the series, because React Native would mostly be using ES6 all along. So yeah, I guess you need to actually just make sure you are up to date with the ES6 stuff. Alright, with that being done, first of all, what we are doing is we are importing the main React framework and the component from the React stuff, right? And then we are importing this platform, which is basically just used to differentiate between different kind of platforms, right? So for example, you can see that instructions would be, for example, for iOS would be shown this one, and for Android would be shown this one. So platform specific work would be done with the help of this library or a module which we are importing from the React Native module itself. Right, next is style sheet. Now style sheet is something which would be used to actually create and basically apply CSS to your React Native component. And I said CSS like CSS because it's not really CSS, right? Obviously, because your code boils down to native code, but it looks like CSS, but you would see that it's mostly Flexbox, and not mostly, it's React Native who works on a Flexbox layout system. Right, so you would be able to make use of stuff like Flex1 and like FlexCrow and stuff like that in your style sheets and apply them later on to your views. Right, now text is you can say it's a kind of a component which would render your text, right? So it's just used to display some text on your application. And view is the container component. You can think it of like a box in which all of your other components like text and basically other components could go in, right? So what the heck are you actually seeing here, if you ask me? Well, what this is this part is known as JSX. Now, JSX, what it does is that it allows you to write HTML inside of JavaScript. If you have never seen this, it might look a bit absurd to you, that how the heck are we actually writing HTML in it. But if you're coming from a React.js background, or basically just know JSX, then you should be able to catch up real quick. But for those of you who do not have any idea, basically what we are doing here essentially is that this app is a component, and basically everything is a component in React.js as well as in React Native. So app is a component whose view looks like this, and by view what I mean is the template of that particular component. So component could have a template, its logic, which would be the functions, which would go here. So you can just go ahead and create my function here, and this would be kind of the logic of some sort of function you would do. And then this render function is called, which basically just you know, gets the view template of that particular component and displays it on the screen. So this is our very basic app component, which just renders simple hello world on the screen. And at the bottom of the screen, what we have is just the styles, where we have like stylesheet.create is used to actually create a kind of a style sheet, which consists of an object, again, whose key consists of the name of the you know, you can say a selector, or basically you can say the class name or something like that, because how you apply is like style as a prop name. Now this is a prop which I was talking about earlier, equal to your whatever object you want to style with. Right, so we're going to come back to all of this later on as we proceed, but this is just a high-level general overview of how this Hello World app works. And if you're following along, if you have understood this, then it's great, because we have done quite some stuff in this, and if you understand everything, it's awesome. If not, then don't worry, we're going to cover all of this bits and pieces later on as well as we proceed with the individual tutorials. We're going to take a look at what props are in React Native, and basically why the heck would you need that and all that stuff, because you're going to make use of props all the time in your React Native application. So it's just easy to, you know, just understand it earlier, and then you would be able to relate a lot of stuff later on. So if we take a look inside our code right here, which is from the last tutorial, you can see that we are actually making use of props right here. So what props are basically is that they give extra information to your components. As I said, this text component or this view component right here would have very specific functions associated with it. Right now we are making use of the inbuilt components. Later on we can create our own custom components as well, but for now let's just say I want to display text with some certain style. Right, so what I'm going to do is make use of the style property, which is associated with this component. Right, prop stands for property, obviously, if you are not able to relate it till now. So let's just say I would give you another example. Let's just say you want to display an image in your application. So what you're going to do is right here, image, and if I hit tab, does it import it for me? No, not really. So you need to import the image component here as well. So once you do that, what happens now is that now you have an image. Right, here you go. Okay, sounds good, but what the heck does this image can do? Well, you need to give it additional information, like the source of the image you want to load. Right, so the source of this image would be and I'm just going to explain what this syntax here is, would be let's just say URI would be something like myawesomesite.com/myawesome-image.png, something like that. So now you're telling this component right here to have this property which gives it some information. Right, and what the heck the syntax is basically this comes from the JSX. So if you want to have a variable, kind of a variable thing inside your attribute value in JSX, what you have to do is just include that inside the curly braces. If you do something like this, this would be static value, right? Right now, since we're making use of an object, so I'm inserting an object here which contains all this stuff, so I need to make use of this curly braces here. You can also do something like this, like constant image info, and then do it like this, and then pass in your image info here. It's one and the same thing, right? Because I'm just writing this object right here directly. You can do it separately as well. So again, this styles.welcome, I can basically just get this stuff here, just put it right here, and there we go. It's one and the same thing, right? So you do not need to really just wander around what this curly brace mean. It's just that you have a variable placeholder right here for the value, or basically something dynamic is coming inside JSX, right? So that's basically it for the props section. And basically, if you are creating your own components, then you would be able to define what kind of props you want to receive and what happens with your component, and all that stuff later on would come to us when we would discuss our own custom components. But for now, you would have to query the documentation to see what components you have for what props you have for a given component, right? So if you see, we could actually, can we get the list of components from here? I'm not sure. So okay, it does not let me go more backwards in the code, so I guess not. So yeah, you could just refer the documentation. Otherwise, you can just follow along and just see what kind of props I'm making use of, and you should be good to go. So let's get started with state in React Native. Alright, so if we take a look inside the code, you would see that actually I have the app already running on my real device. Now you could use an emulator as well. I'm just using my real device here, so it does not really matter. Okay, so what's we learned about props in the last video was that properties are basically these things which are associated with your components and which could be passed down into something known as your child components, which we would come to later on, right? But what state means, every component has a particular state, right? So what that means is that if you change the state of your component, and by state I mean a particular object in that component, React would smartly check what stuff was changed in that particular state and which stuff your component needs to be updated of. Okay, so let's just break this into code example, right? So first of all, let me just get rid of all of this stuff which is not really required and clean it up a little bit so that it's easier for you to see, right? So we can just keep style sheet, I guess, get rid of this. Then text, we can just get rid of the image as well here for now, and there we are. Alright, so now what I need to do is just create a constructor here, constructor, and I believe you know what this constructor is. It's just ES6, right? Now what I'm going to do is say this.state is a blank object, right? So this state is actually a very special kind of object. It's not just a regular object right now. It's monitored by React in the background, and whenever I call, let's just say this.setState, right, if there's something appreciable to be changed, then this render method would be called again, right? So if I use my state variable somewhere inside the render method, and the set state is called, which changes my state variable, then what happens is that this component is re-rendered after detecting what particular things are changed, right? So let's just see a quick example of that. So what I'm gonna do here is let's just say okay, what I'm gonna do is basically, let's just say I'm gonna get rid of this style.welcome, or basically what we can do is just include this as an array, and I can say that this is like custom styles, something like this dot custom styles, right? So what happens now, or instead of like this .state.custom styles. Right, so what I'm doing here is that applying styles.welcome, which is this block of styles, to my text component right now, and this thing as well, which I'm gonna develop, which I'm gonna write here really soon. So don't worry about what style does. It's just an example to show what state does right now. So I'm gonna say this .state custom styles. Let's just say this is a custom style, and if you follow along, we could see that we can set an opacity of, let's just say, 0, right? And what I can do is let's just say I can create a set interval here, and I can say something like every 1 second. What I want to do is do something like this .set state, and I'm gonna say my custom styles is actually consisting of opacity of 1, right? So what that means is that every second I'm changing something in my main state of the component, right? So the React application should technically re-render my component with the updated styles, right? Okay, so let's just go to device, and if I just shake my device here and hit on reload here, you would see that the development server returned. Okay, let's just try to reload it. Let's just try to run the bundle again. Let's see what's happening here. So it says me this is not allowed before super. Okay, cool. So we can just call super here, and we should be good to go, I believe. Let's just go back to the terminal and see if it's building or not. Alright, so you can see that we have 100% of the build, and now if I just take a look one more time, just shake my device here, hit reload, you would see that it does not blink because opacity is not really the style which you can apply on a text field, right? So let's just change this from opacity to color, and let's just say I just want to make this color of let's just say green, and let's just say I just give it a default color of blue here. So it will start with blue, and it will just toggle between red, green, red, green, red, green, and so on and so forth. Let's just try one more time. Here I go, shake it, reload. It starts with red, green, then it's always green. Okay, because yeah, obviously because you're not turning it back to red, right? So we can just say here that if this .state.custom styles.color is red, then turn it to green, otherwise turn it to red, just like that. One more time, let's just shake our device and reload, and you can see how fast these builds are because you're not really building the whole application itself. That's what React Native does behind the scene for you. So now you can see that we have red, green, toggling colors with us, and basically that is possible because of the state. So you see that we do not have any sort of logic which updates, which re-renders this component when the state changes, right? So React does it automatically on its end. So that's basically how state works, and mostly in bigger application what we adapt is something known as Redux, but it's way too early for things like Redux to be discussed. But right now states would be good for us to go, and basically would help us to manage the actual state of the component, how the component remembers stuff. We're going to take a look at what style sheets are in React Native, and basically just create a little application as well surrounding around that concept. So let's get started. Okay, so now you can see that on the left I have my device opened again, and on the right we can see the code which was responsible in the last tutorial for just toggling off this color. So let's just get rid of all of this stuff and let's just see what these style sheets are. Okay, so what's the deal with them is, and let me just actually just change it to tabs. Yep. Alright, so what's happening here is that basically you create some sort of styles in React just like you do on the web, and React Native converts them into native properties associated with those particular elements, right? So for example, you can position a view somewhere, you can basically change the properties like color of the text, its opacity and background and stuff like that. So what we have right now is with React Native, what's the thing is that all the layouts would be actually Flexbox based, right? So what that means is that every view container here, every element is basically would follow the Flexbox system, which comes from the web on with CSS, right? So by that, what I mean is that all these elements have by default a display flex property associated with them, and you cannot actually change it. React just works on Flexbox system. So what we can do is basically right here we can try to create a very simple kind of like an interface. So what that would be is, let's just say half the screen would be, let's just say red, half would be green, right? So this is our container. Let me just go ahead and create another view here. Let me just say that I have styles.half with this, right? And I end this view, and what I'm going to do is just leave this container with flex of 1, which means just get all the space if it's the only child. Justify container, let me just get rid of these first, and let me just get rid of this as well, right? So what I'm going to do now is say, let's say half as flex of 1, and then background color of let's just say red, and let's just name this half 1, right? And let's just get and name this half 2, and we're going to do a similar thing to this. And what we're going to do here is say half 2 and then background color of blue, right? So what's the thing here? And again, by default on the web, Flexbox follows a flex direction of row, right? But on React Native, it follows by default a flex direction of column. So now if I just go back to my device, shake it a little here and just reload it, you should see that we get a red and a blue column here. Let me just reposition this right here. So you see that our half 1 is red and our half 2 is blue, and as you can see that by default it follows a flex direction of column instead of row. So if you want a row, then you can specify here flex direction and then row and hit save. And actually I can just enable something known as hot reloading here, so you should be able to see changes without me shaking that device. So if I just remove the statement again, hit save, you can see that hot reloading at its best can just do it automatically, right? So that's the thing. Okay, now let's just go ahead and create some complex layouts, right? So what we can do now, and basically if you just know how to play around with Flexbox, it's kind of easy to do. So we can say like styles.half to 1, and we can just say a similar thing on half to 2, and for here I can say half to 1. It has a, let's just say flex of 1 again, and background color of, let's just say green, and half of 2 is also flex of 1 and background color is yellow, right? Let me just get a comma here, and now if we go ahead and see, you can see that okay, it kind of is not looking like it should, and the reason for that is because what we want basically is that yeah, it's actually working fine, because as I said, Flexbox works in the flex direction of column. So what we can do is just change this half to right here to flex direction of row, right? And you can see that and actually what we can just dismiss that. You can see that now we have got a bigger element and then two smaller elements in their way. Now again, it really depends on how much you know about Flexbox layouts, right? So you can just practice them on the web, and that would be kind of similar thing on the on here as well. So here's a way to actually display it in 2:1 ratio. So green takes 66.66% of the width, and this yellow takes 33.33, and there we are. So basically now you can just go ahead and include some sort of text with them as well. So this is 2:1, right? And you can do a similar thing here with let's say this is 2:2 and this is 1, right? So now if we take a look, you see that it's kind of ugly. So what we can do is just apply a style of, let's just say, styles.text here to every text element, and we can just customize them thereafter, just like that. So we can just say color is white, and then let's just say font size is, let's just say 30, like that. And one more thing, what I want to do here is just say that these half ones and half twos right here have a justify content of center. And again, if you can observe that these JavaScript values follows camel casing, right? So what happens here is that if the CSS property was like this, then you remove the dash and you make the next letter's first word capital, first letter, next word's first letter capital actually. So here we are, justify content center, align items center as well. So this would just center the text inside the block. Similarly, we can do this to 2:1 and 2:2, and again this would, let me just make them equal width here, and let's just change this from yellow to, let's just say black, so that the text is visible, because yeah, I can see it on my device straight away that it was not visible, so I knew. So here we are, and now if I take a look, you can see that we got our text centered and all that great stuff, right? So okay, one more thing, let's just say we can see that half 2:1 and half 2:2 are sharing a lot of common stuff, right? Apart from the background color, they are actually same. So what we can do is just we can make something like half 2x as a class, and actually I can just apply all that common stuff right here, because it's a good practice as well as it will just make your code much cleaner and easier to read. Now we can just get rid of this apart from that background color, right? So now what I want to do is basically apply half 2x to both of these elements. So how would I do that? Well, to do that, what I'm going to do is, instead of supplying this just an object, I'll supply this an array of objects, and they would be applied in the order in which you supply them. So I'm going to supply it half 2x right here. So I'm going to say styles dot half 2x, and similarly to our here styles dot half 2x, and right now it does not really matter because the properties do not, you know, overlap each other, so the precedence does not really matter here. Now you can see that our code looks much more cleaner and less than the previous one, and we can just apply multiple style sheets to our elements as well. So yeah, that's basically it, and you can basically supply any object you want here. You can just associate that object with your state as well, and then you would update that variable, your render function would be called, and your CSS applied styles would be updated as well to that element. I'm just going to show you how to work with text input in React Native, and basically it just allows you to get input from the user, and you're going to make use of text input all the way because forms are almost everywhere in every application. So for example, if you want to create a form to ask about users information, or maybe like you're creating some sort of game or something where you want user's name, and the cases are endless. So let's just take a look at how to actually write a very basic text input code. So right now you can see that I have with me the previous code, the code from the previous tutorial. So let's just get rid of all of this, right? And let's just get rid of this one as well, except for this container one, right? So now what I want to do is inside this view, why the heck, there we are. Okay, so now what I want to do is basically inside this view I'm going to write text input right here, and I can just import it from text input just like that. I'm going to say something like that, right? So you can see that I immediately get a text input. So when I click on that, you can see that I can actually type stuff around, right? So since this is an actual device, so I can just operate it from my end as well. All right, so what we want, however, is you can actually customize it with the various properties and methods associated with it. So if you take a look at those, you can see right here in the documentation, if you just open this and go a little down, you can see all the properties, all the props associated with it. So you can see that we have got a bunch of stuff like editable and maximum length, number of lines, on blur, on change. So what we can do is basically target something like on change text. So you can see that its definition is callback is called when text inputs change. And the difference between on change callback, that is called when text inputs text changes, and this is that this on change, when it would be called, then it would not pass the updated text to your function, right? So that's the basic only difference. So if you just want to listen to if the text has changed, then use this one, and if you want to get that text as well along with that, so you can use this one. So let's just go ahead and implement this on change text, and how we do that is just simply doing like on change text. And again, as I told you in JSX, you have to use these curly braces so that you are actually including dynamic content here, right? So I'm going to say this dot handle change text, right? And again, a couple of things here. What I'm going to do is basically bind this. Now the reason for this is because we bind a function whenever if you want to use some sort of things which are actually associated with this class in this function. For example, let's just say you want to access state in this function handle change text. So you can access this state only when this particular function points to this class. And basically this is how JavaScript works. So I assume that you know a little bit about it. It's kind of on the advanced side of JavaScript, but it's okay. I guess you should know this. So this, if points to this class, then only you can access the state. Obviously that makes sense because state is a property of this class right here. But what happens is that methods like these, when called from props, do not necessarily have the value of this associated with this particular class, because the context of this is actually set to whatever function that is being called, whatever the calling function, wherever the calling function belongs, right? So let me just give you a quick recap of this. So for example, if you have, let's just say, an object, let's just say this is an object. Let me just comment this whole thing. or let's just leave it like that only. So if I have like function, my function, and basically not like that, function, and then you do like console.log this, right? So when you do like x.function, then this points to this particular object, right? But when you do like something like if you have this function outside like that, when you do like function 2, then this actually points to the window global inside if you're working with web, obviously, right? So what I wanted to say here is that the context of this right here could change whenever depending upon how this onChange text is called, right? So to avoid that, what we do is we just bind this function, we just force this function to actually follow the this of this class only all the time, right? So let's just get rid of this thing, and you only need to bind this if you want to actually access something from this class. If there's no use, then you can just remove this line. So what I'm gonna do here is just say this dot set state, and again I need to use this bind because I'm using set state, which would only be available if I am pointing to this particular class. So I'm gonna, first of all, let me just say this. This is value is empty, and I can say here, and I believe it's not really value, but because if you set the value of a text, default value, I believe it was, yep. So yeah, if you set a value of a text input, then you would not be able to change it. So you need to set a default value. So this dot state dot value. We can just say edit me, something like that, and basically right here we can say value is, and actually we can just get the new text here. We can just say new text, right? And on a similar note, we can just say you are writing this dot state dot value, something like that, where you have to actually reflect the change as you are writing it. So let me just reload it right here, and okay, so the application has stopped. Let's just see why. Let's just go to our module bundler. Let me just try to run it one more time. Oh, obviously, because you cannot have text just floating like that, right? So now if we reload it one more time, you can see that you are writing edit me is what I get here. And now if I try to edit it, like if I remove it, you can see that it updates with me, right? So whatever I'm writing here, it gets reflected into the state. And what the heck? Okay, so React Native on Android might have just reinstalled the app. So again, if you can see, it's basically the same thing, right? So now what you can do basically as a task is that create a basic layout of login, right? So how would you do that? I can just give you a little bit of, a starter. So what you can do is basically say something like username, right? And you can actually enclose this whole thing in a view as well. Password, right? And I'll just leave that button part to you. So I'm going to say this is container flex1, and flex direction is obviously column, so we can just say justify content center, and you can see it gets us right there, and I can just say padding of 20 as well, so that we get a little bit of distance, right? So now you can see that we have got a little nice looking layout, I believe. And there's a problem again, because you cannot have like username and password reflecting the same thing. So username, and basically you can just keep it in a state, or you can just, you know, um, get it when you tap on that button as well. It's kind of useful, for example, if you're creating an application where you want the user to enter PIN, and as the user types 1 2 3 4, four digits are with you, and you can just basically verify it. So there you have to just constantly keep your UI and your model in sync. But here I guess you can just omit that. But anyways, so handle change text, and yeah, basically I guess we can just get rid of the state here, right? And basically this one as well. New text, we can just console here, and not really, let's just say handle username changes. So for example here, we're going to take a look at something known as uncontrolled and controlled components, and what's basically the difference between them. So let's get into it. Alright, so here we are with our little dirty application from the last video, and let's just first of all get rid of these methods right here, and this one as well. Here we are, there we go, and hit save. Alright, so far so good. Now the thing is, if we take a look at the last video, what we did is that we had to retrieve value of this text input somehow, right? So what we did first of all is just assigned a state variable to its value, and on change text we just updated that state variable so that we get the value all the time. So the UI and the React.js code, React Native code, is always in sync, right? So that's a way. Another way is you just get this input value whenever you want to. For example, like on click of a button, or some action or whatever. So it's a specific event, right? So for example, if I create a button right here, so let's just say this button has a title of hello, and if I just save this, let me just include this button here as well, so you can see that we get a nice little hello here. And what I want to do basically is that when it's pressed, this dot button pressed, let's just assign this dot button press is this dot button press dot bind this, right? And we can just say button pressed is a method here. So what I want to do is basically get username and password values, right? So one way is to just like we did earlier, but I'll just first of all explore the other way, which is like constant username, then getting that username value, and password, getting that password value. So before that, what I want to do show you is something known as, let me just shake it here, debug JS remotely. So what it does, when you click on it, it will open Chrome inside your Chrome browser, or actually a React Native debugger inside your Chrome browser, and you would be pretty much able to access your JavaScript right here. So what we can do is basically say something like reference. We want to refer this input field, right? So what I want to do is say something like a ref, and then these curly braces, input, and I'm going to say this dot username is input. All right, what the heck happened here? Well, this is basically kind of like doing like ID is username in HTML, right? So pretty much you have done this thing. So now you can access this input through this dot username, right? So I'm just going to get rid of this and say a similar thing to this dot password. And I'm just putting an underscore here because I don't want to just randomly by mistake use another variable named username and set its property, override its property. So it's, yeah, it's just like it's kind of private, but it's not. But anyways, so what I want to do now is just basically say console.log this dot username and this dot password. Let's just see what this has gotten for us. And basically before that, what I want to do is yeah, just nothing. Okay, so let's just save this and type something and hit hello here, right? And you can see right here, if I zoom in a little, we get username and password here. So if I go to like this property last native text, you see that we get the actual text FGVC, which is in username, right? And on similar basis we can get last native text on this, right? So this is like kind of loading your value on demand. So I can say username is this dot username dot last native text, if I spell it right, yep. And constant password is this dot password dot last native text. I can just say username password, just like that, and just get rid of this as well. Hit save and hit save again because React Native is stubborn. And here we are. So now if I enter FFU and FFF, I hit hello because I'm not sure why I did that. So FFU is username and FFF is password, right? Now this is one way. Now this thing, the way I have done it right now is called uncontrolled component. And basically it's not really uncontrolled component in React Native. This controlled and uncontrolled analogy is I've just stolen it from React.js because in React.js this is the concept, right? So uncontrolled components are like this. So Android is managing its value and is giving you to whenever you want to access it, right? You do not have access to it all the time. To make it a controlled component, what you need to do is, first of all, we no longer need this reference, and what we can do is just say default value of this dot state dot username, and I can say like on change text is text, and I can say this dot set state username is text, right? On similar basis we can do this thing and this one as well, password as text. There we are. We can just initialize the state with a blank object if you wish, or yeah, that should be good, I guess, right? So now what I want to do is get rid of these two ones as well. So now I always have access to this dot username and this dot password, irrespective if I press the button or not. So I will always have access to username and password because React is now managing those values instead of letting the host platform, in this case Android, to manage it, right? So if I hit save now, and if I just enter something like this and hit hello, you can see that we get undefined because this dot state dot username, not username like that, and this dot state dot password. Let's just try one more time and hit hello, and you can see that we get just like before, but this time React is managing. So this is a controlled component. Now the thing is that React actually recommends you to always not really always use controlled, but in most of the cases use controlled components. Now it's okay to use controlled components, but the thing is that if you do not really need to interact with these components a lot, what I believe is that you are kind of like, updating state at every keystroke. So it might not really hurt performance that much, but I guess you could just go ahead with an uncontrolled approach if you're not really interacting with the component at all. So you can do that. Otherwise, it's equally good if you're just going a controlled way as well. Basically, just having this as a controlled component gives you a lot more power than uncontrolled one. We're going to take a look at how to create our own calculator. Yes, you heard that right, in React Native from the very scratch. So let's just start off by creating some applications in React, because it's kind of monotonous to just go through over everything in React, like thousands of components and how everything works, and then at the end of the series you would be like, what the hell am I supposed to do with all that stuff? So I've decided to break this down into little applications built with React Native. And let's just start with one calculator, and we're going to see how we go along with that. So let's get into it. So you can see that right now I have my calculator open. Now obviously we are not going to make such a UI and functionality wise application. Like, we're not gonna do this animation kind of stuff and like all that stuff right now in React Native, because it's kind of like advanced to do, but we're gonna come to that as we go along in the series. So you can see right here what we need is, first of all, a place to actually show the stuff user wants to do. Then here would be our result, and then right here we have our buttons plus the operational buttons, right? So let's just decide a little bit of UI for this in this video. So what we're gonna do is, first of all, define a let's just say styles.result here, which would contain our result, just like that. Then what we want is view style as styles dot not really result, but or you can say that it's result. It's just what the result of what user is typing, and then we can say like calculation here, right? And then what we want is view styles dot buttons, and like that. I'm gonna say that this is view styles dot let's just say numbers, and on the right what we have is styles dot operations, right? So that basically is the whole complete layout which we're gonna need, the parent layout at least. So let's just now use styles, and yeah, we can use actually you would be thinking that what the heck is the difference between actually stylesheets.create and just using a regular JavaScript object. Well, the thing is that you should always use stylesheet.create, because when you don't use it, then React cannot actually validate your keys and all that stuff, and basically this kind of like some sort of optimization as well, which React does under the hood. So in short, it does not hurt to actually use stylesheet.create all the time when you're creating styles. So just stick with that. So with that being done, let's just create some styles now. Now for the container part, what we need is just the flex one, so that it gives us full screen right now. Then for the result, what we need right now is, let's just say I give it a flex of 1, right? I give it a, let's just say, background color of red for now, so that it's visible to us. Then for calculation part, I'm gonna give it a flex of, or let me just give it a flex of 2 here, flex of 1 here, right? And I'm just gonna make it background color of green, right? Then for this part, for buttons, what I want first of all is basically like I want to display these buttons in a column, right? So what I'm gonna do here is say flex direction as column, or actually in row. I want to display this in row, right? Because by default, React.js displays everything in columns. So I want to display it in a row as 2 elements. So there we are. Then for the next part, what we have is numbers. And numbers go right here. And I'm just going to say this has a background color of, let's just say, yellow for now. Again, so that it's just visible, nothing to do with original application which we would be developing. And operations would be background color of, let's just say, how many colors are there? Let's just say black for now, right? And let's just give them a flex property as well. And for the buttons, what we can say is just flex grow 1, so that it just occupies all the remaining space. So numbers could be flex of, let's just say 3. I'm not really sure, we have to play around numbers here. And I can give it a flex of 1 here. So there we are. And now if we take a look at what we have actually done, so to do that, let's just go back to terminal and do a React Native run Android here. So React would fire the application real quick, and by the time we are waiting for that to happen, let's just see how we're going to create these numbers. So to create them again, we would need to have 1, 2, 3, 4 separate views inside our numbers, which would contain rows of elements, right? Because we cannot have grid layouts and all that fancy stuff in React yet, because it just supports a single display. And holy crap, view is not imported. That is so cool. Let's just import that, and here we are. Well, it kind of looks bad because the result is too big, right? So what we can do instead is, instead of using flex row here, let's just say I have a flex of we have 2 plus 1 3 and 7. So it takes 70% width of the screen, right? It takes 20% and it takes 10% height, not width, sorry. So there we are with a very basic layout for our calculator. We're gonna take a look at how we can actually go along and build the internals of our parent layouts. And let's get into it real quick. So we can just create some buttons here by, as I said in the last video, by creating rows of buttons. So we're going to say styles.row here, right? So these would be our rows, and we're going to need, I'm not sure how many, 1, 2, 3, 4 rows right here. So we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, just like that. And for each row we're going to need a button, right? So button title, and I'm just going to give it a title of, let's just say 0 for now to every row, just like that. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, and we're going to have 1, 2, 3, and we're going to have 1, 2, 3. There we are, right? And button is not defined very well. Let's just import this guy, and there we are. Okay, so what the heck is this? So what we want to do actually is display these elements inside a row, right? So I'm gonna say right here as a flex direction of row, as simple as that. So you can see we get these elements now, but what's the deal with them is that we want these rows to be equal in height, all of them, and occupy all the space. So there we are, that's a start. And what we can say is if I'm not wrong, justify content, we'll have to take a look at this. Center, align items, stretch, stretch, or it could be other way around as well, I'm not really sure. Yes, it is, I believe. Okay, so we have justify content value of, let's just, okay, give it a center only. I believe there used to be a stretch. So anyways, let's just say this is space around instead, so that we get nice little buttons like that. Okay, so now we have buttons. So what we want to do is basically add these operational buttons as well. So to do that, again, we're gonna make use of, and actually we can just kind of make use of the buttons here directly, because these buttons actually are one single row. 1 2 1, what the heck, 1 2, give me a second here. All right, 1 2 3 4, there we are. And if we save this, take a look, just like that again, but styles.operation, right? So what we're gonna do here is say that its flex direction is obviously column, but I want justify content as space around here as well, so that we get something like that, right? So actually I guess we should just take a look at the docs to see what justify content here accepts, and you can see that it accepts flex start, flex end, center, space between, space around, and space evenly. Alright, so how about if I want to stretch it, line items, stretch, stretch. I'm not sure, I guess it used to be somewhere, but it's okay. Stretch. Okay. So, alright, anyways. So, here we are, but that kind of looks funny. We'll just revert it back to center at least for now. So, here we are with the basic layout. What we want in here is, for the result part, text style styles dot result text, right? What we can say is just basically like 1 2 1, just like that. And for calculation, or let's just say 11 times 11 here, and for calculation part, what we're gonna do is say a similar thing, styles dot calculation text. And again, we are doing all of this in a single file, but don't worry about that. We're gonna take a look, we're gonna learn how to split React Native code into multiple modules, because that's essentially what you're gonna do all the time, because that's a best practice, actually, just modularizing your code. So calculation text, what I want to do with this is font size as 20, color as white, and similarly to not really calculation text, I believe, to result text. That's what I wanted. So result text, here we are. For calculation text, what I want to do is font size as 14 and color as white too. And there we are. So let's just increase this a little bit more, 30, and let's just make it 24. Alright, so now we just want to just center align this stuff. So I'm just gonna say result right here. If we see justify content flex, and justify content is, I guess, when you're working with the flex direction of column, it's kind of like, it always confuses me. It's kind of like justifies along the y-axis. Let's just see, center, align items, flex, and yeah, so it was complete guess, right? So it just worked out just fine. So we're gonna need a similar one on our calculation part as well. So there we are. Here we go. So this is the basic layout of our calculator right now. I know we need to expand these buttons. We're going to take a look at that in the next videos, and we need to change this content as well all along. All these buttons and all these numbers should be right. And let's just make it a little bit more usable and customizable. Okay, so right now you can see that we have these tiny little ugly buttons right here with us. So let's just make them full width and height. And to do that, actually what we have to do is not use this button but use something else. Let's just say touchable opacity. And what this is basically just like a button, but it just responds to your touch nicely. So I can just say that this is something like that. And if I just change it for one row right now, there we are. So if I save it, okay, we just need button for now. So yeah, touchable opacity needs you to add a text node. So we'll need to change it here as well. So now what we can see right here is that if I touch on this, it kind of responds, if you can see. So let's say this is style.button right here with us. So here we are. Right, and right here if I just go ahead and say button as flex 1, align items stretch, line self as stretch as well, and this should be obviously styles. Right, so what we can see now that this touchable opacity thing responds even if I tap right here, right, instead of on that 0. So that means our button is kind of working for now. So what we can say is just instead is just make it like justify content center and align items center, because we would be anyway listening to the touchable opacity right here instead. So let's just see, you can see that it would get messy really quickly right here if we continue to develop code like this. So what I'm going to do is actually develop this whole button section separately. So let's just say I do something like for let I equal 0, I is less than 3, I plus plus, which is the number of 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's just make it 4. Number of rows. For let j equal 0, j is less than 3, j plus plus, right? For now what we can do is just say that let elements is something like that, or we can just say something like view, or actually let's just keep it an empty array. So what we can do right here is just say let row is also an empty array, and right here what I'm gonna say is that row dot push touchable opacity, and basically this block of code right here. I'm just gonna copy this and let's just change it to I, or rather I plus 1, right? And here I'm gonna say elements dot push, and what I want to push is a view style of styles.row with our row in it, and here we go. So I hope it makes sense. I can just name it rows so that it makes more sense. Right, so we have our all that stuff now. So right now what I can just basically do is go ahead and delete all of this and just say, and actually till here, and just say rows. Right, so if I hit save, you can see that we get it right, but it kind of is not really what we want, so it would be kind of like this. So you can see that we get 1 2 3 2 3 4 3 4 5. What the hell? Okay, let's see. So you might want to just debug this stuff later on. So I'm just gonna assume that I got numbers in the right place. I'll just take a look at why they are not in the right place. It's somewhere in this logic, so you can just figure it out yourself. So what I want instead right now is to just basically show you can see that all of these buttons now respond to the touch. So we can say that I can give it a property of like styles.button text, right? And I can just go ahead and create this as well and say that it has a font size of, let's just say 25 maybe, or let's just say 30. Right, so here we are with our buttons right here for the calculator. And similarly, what we can do for our operations is a similar thing right here. So, and actually let's just fix it right here quickly. And actually to fix this, what we can do is just say let nums is let's just see, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. And actually for the last row we had to actually work out of the loop because last row is not really you know, numbers, all numbers. So it's kind of like, I'm not sure, there's a 0 in middle and there's an equal to, I believe, at the end, but again I'm not really sure. So let's just keep it 0 0 and equal to for now. I'll just see in the calculator later on. So now I can just say here as nums of I and j, right, and we get our correct output now. So that is one way. And similarly what we can do is for the operations we can name them like plus, minus, multiply, divide, 1 2 3 4, right? So what I'm gonna do is now, let's just say I copy this, or actually we do not need to copy it at all. We can just say let k equal to 0, and actually we can just make use of I again because this is scoped inside the function. So I'm just gonna say I plus plus again, just like that. So again, let's just see, let ops, something like this. So I'm gonna say ops dot push, and then this whole stuff right here which we had earlier, with the exception that again it is a button in fact, but this would be operations, and this could be the button text only. That's not a problem. So here we are, and let's just name this ops here, and operations of I should be sufficient here, and there we go. So what we can do here is, instead of just applying the button text class, what I can do is apply another class, styles.white, let's just say, which just makes it white. Right, so there we are with our basic calculator interface with the buttons working. kind of, right? At least responding to the touch, but the result and the calculation part is still the same. So we're going to take a look at that in the next tutorial. So right now you can see that our calculator interface kind of looks complete, I believe. The buttons are in place, the buttons kind of respond a little well as well, and they are full width, right? So you can just click here and it will just respond, right? You can click here and the 4 would respond. So if we can just draw the boundaries, then you would be able to see that these are actually enclosed inside a boundary, right? Okay, so anyways, first of all, let me just fix this, that this should be a dot right here, right? And what we have for now is that we have to actually get some sort of function called whenever I click on this button. So let's just go ahead and create this. So I'm gonna say that this is something like button pressed, right? So I'm just gonna say that I would just get the text of that particular button, let's just say. So right here what we can say is something like, when I click on this on press, I believe. So once you do that, what I want to do is just call this function right here, this dot button pressed, with the argument of nums I and j, right? So if I just go ahead and save this, and if I just console.log this as well, hit save, and if I just go ahead and shake my device here a little and enable, and actually it's already enabled, so we should be able to see it somewhere right here. So you can see that our app right here is enabled. So it's just bugging about that. We should add a key property so that it kind of fits well with React. So I can just do that and these warnings would go away. So it's not a problem right here. So what we can do now is just tap a button. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, dot, and equal to. Okay, everything is responding correctly, right? So what we want to do is basically, once we tap on these particular buttons, I want to update this thing, right? So what I want to do here is say, for example, first of all, let me just get the view right here, which is responsible for this, and this is this view, right? So what we want to do is basically set this text to something like this dot state dot let's just say result text, because again, as I told you earlier, if I change my state variable somewhere, then the render call would automatically be called by React under the hood, and it will just update that particular thing, that particular component, right? So what I can do right here is just say, and actually right here we can just keep the result text blank. It does not really matter if it's null, it just does not print that. So what I'm gonna do is say this dot set state, and I'm gonna say result text is whatever the text was. So this dot state dot result text plus our updated text right here, which comes from the button, right? So if I save this and see, like 1, 2, if I type 12, so you can see that it reflects right here. So if I can just remove this and say 12.54, like that, or 549, something like that. Now the problem with this is obviously, like if I type equal to, then it just writes that as well, because it's not really distinguishing right now between the different kind of numbers. The only thing which is not a number really right now here is this equal to sign, because a decimal can be, you can regard it as a number because it is used with numbers. So what you want to do is add a little bit of validation here. So let's just add an equal to validation. So I'm just going to say if text is equal to and equal to, well, in that case what we want is we want the actual result so far, which we have right here. So I'm just going to say calculate result here with this dot state dot result text, like that. And actually we can just return from here as well. So I'm just going to say, and actually this should be this, right? So I'm just going to say calculate result, and I'm just going to say text here. We could have just accessed it here also, but yeah, actually we can just do it right here as well, because we have access to state in all the methods, right? So what I'm gonna do is just say constant text is my result text. So we actually need to now parse this text. Basically, like, you have to break this text into tokens and then perform all the operations accordingly, right? So we're gonna learn a little bit of tricks here, how computers actually do calculation. So that's basically how we are going to proceed. So when you actually enter a huge kind of like 3 plus 3 times 6, let's just say raised to the power of 5 divided by 2 plus 7, all that stuff. So how a computer would read that, we'll just take a look at that later on, right? When we'll come to parsing this text, right? So that could be an example for us. So for now, we have fixed the equal to problem. So you can see that if I tap on equal to, we do not really get that equal to typed. And again, what we can do is just basically not allow a lot of zeros in the front. It's okay to have zeros like that, but it's not really okay to have zeros, a lot of zeros in the front, right? And actually what we need to do is add a back button to the app as well. And if we just take a look inside the calculator, what we have is a delete button right here, right? So what we have is 1 2 3 4 5, but how's it working? Division, multiplication, minus and plus, plus, minus, multiplication, division, 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, yeah, so the rows are uneven. The number of rows are uneven in this case. So yeah, we can just do that. That should be easy for us now. We just have to add a, let's say, let's just keep it D for now to delete the text, right? And what we can do is just basically let it wait. And what I want to do now is, if I type something and if I press this D button right here, I want this text last element to be deleted. Now this is a little bit of tricky part here, because right here we are just generalizing it over the loop. So what we want to do instead is, what we can do is, let me just think. I guess we could add each of them separately, or what we can do is just on press, we can pass in this function. Let's just say this is operate. Actually we have to do this dot operate here and say operations of I, right? So once we have that, what we can do is call this operate function with the operation, right? And I'm just gonna switch over this operation, because why the hell not? So I'm gonna say case D, which is the delete in our case. What I want is I want to update the state again. Remember, this text right here is set with the set state. So what we have is, let's just say we got our text back again, this dot state dot result text, which gives us this text right here back to us, right? Okay, so what I want to do now is actually just split it. So what you can do is just slice it, or just, you know, convert it into an array and just do it in one line. So I'm just going to do it in one line and split it by every character. Then what I want to do is just, you know, actually we can just do like text dot pop. I guess it's pop for back and unshift for front. so we should be good. So once we have done that, and actually we can just say let text here, right here, and text dot join, and actually you could just run a slice call here as well. I don't really remember its syntax, otherwise I would have done that, but here we are simply with the split call as well. So now what we have is that we want to update the state again, so I'm just going to call in set state method right here and say result text is again equal to our text right here. So if I hit save now, and if I just type something like 555, hit D, you can see that it gets erased, and obviously that's a bad example because all the digits was same. So if I write 1 2 3 and okay, how did it add a comma itself if I delete it? Okay, so here we are with our first bug. I'm not really sure how it did that. Let's just reload it. So if I add like 555 555 1 2 3, how the hell did that comma appear there? So if I do delete now, so it says me this dot state dot result text dot split is not a function. Okay, well, why is it not? I believe we can just console.log our this.state.result text here every time, so that we can just see in the console what exactly is going on. So if I just reload it here, so if I write 555 numbers like that and hit delete a lot of times, so we see that if I hit delete a lot of times we get this thing. So let's just see it in the debugger. So we have it correctly. Wait a second, what exactly is happening here? Let's just oh, obviously, because this should go like here, because we cannot just split over an array again, right? So if I do like this now and hit delete, yeah, it makes sense now, because what I was doing here is that I was just joining it, but I was not storing this result anywhere, right? So it was just a waste call. So now you can type basically anything, like if I just remove this dot and all that stuff and hit delete to delete that, and here you are. It's just a basic implementation of the typing feature for now. So here we are with our tutorial from the last video. I don't know what that means, but anyways, so let's just proceed with what we have been doing so far. So in this video I would just want to add support for these plus, minus and multiplication buttons as well here. And actually we can see that we do not see the division button, and the reason for that is that because we are omitting that. And actually we can just make it a little bit more dynamic by just replacing this 4 with the, or actually not this one, this 4 with the length of this, but it does not really matter because in calculators we have very fixed operations available with us, especially in the one which we are coding right now. Right, so here we are with our little division sign back with us. So now what we want to do is just say that when it's not D, when it's something like say plus. So again, I just want to add it for now to the screen because we're gonna tokenize all our text later on, so it should be kind of easy for us. So for plus, for minus, and for multiplication and for division, what I want is just add a basic validation that our text is not really blank. There's something at least to the left of it, right? Because that's what we really want. I don't want a person to start with a plus sign because that does not make sense. So what we can do is just say that if state this dot state dot text is equal to blank, that means the user is directly pressing these buttons, which we do not really want. So I just want to say return, just like that. And actually this should be the case in our case D as well, because I don't want the user to go beyond anything. It does not really make sense, because what we are doing essentially here, if we take a look inside the console, you can see that we get a blank element. So splitting on a blank element right here, you can see it does not really make any sense, because it returns us a array of 0 length. So when we split on that, we pop it, we get nothing. So we join it with nothing to get a string back, an empty string. So yeah, it kind of works out itself, but we can actually just add this validation right here. So if it's not the case, then what we want to do, and actually just make it shorter in a single line, so that we can just save 2 lines whenever necessary. There we go. So now if that's not the case, then what we want to have is just this dot set state as result text is this dot state dot result text plus our operation right there, operation. There we are. So now if you just see something like this plus this minus this, all right, looks good. Now another thing which I want to do is on the button pressed, if this thing is an equal to button, so obviously what I want to do is verify a little bit of results, a little bit of things right here, that first of all what we can see is, let me just think about it. What we can do is just see if text dot or actually should we just tokenize everything first? Let me just think here. So we can actually ultimately we have to tokenize the text anyway, right? So yeah, I guess we should tokenize all the text first and then proceed onwards. And by tokenizing, what I mean is that if our text is something like this, so I can just convert it into like 3, then plus, then 3, then star, and then 6, and then power, and all that stuff. And not really like that, it's just like splitting character by character, but obviously like in the order of how it should be tokenized. So yeah, I guess then that's it for this video, I believe, because in the next video I'll be just showing you how to tokenize all of this stuff once you press calculator, once you actually press an equal to. And obviously we can just fix this little bug right here, which just allows us to type a single sign multiple times. So what we can do right here for now is just say if this dot state dot text is blank, or this dot state dot text dot let me see, split dot let's see, pop equals to, or let's just say this is our character, right? So what I want now is actually test whether this is okay. Let's just take it this way. Let me just clear stuff. So I'm just gonna get last character. I'm just doing it so that it's easier for you to see and follow along. So this gives us our last character inside this field, for example a minus for now. And what I want to do, if last character dot, or actually not like that, if operations dot index of last character is not equal to -1, that means that last character is in fact an operation. So what I want to do is just return, because I do not want to have 2 simultaneous operations, right? So again, what we can do is just, and actually not like that, because the operation could consist of a delete character as well, which we want to allow. So we can say is greater than 0, right? So it omits our delete character. And actually let me just move it, let's just change this to a class property instead. So this dot operations, there we go. And I'm just gonna say this dot operations just like that and move it into our constructor just like that. Alright, so here we are. Now what I want to do is, actually I have already done that. So let's just hit save and see if we can see anything. Okay, we get a split of undefined because it's not text, it's actually result text. Hit save, reload, plus operations is not defined because this is this dot operations. That's, well, that's embarrassing. Anyway, so let's just save it, reload, plus minus does not work very well, divide, yep, does not work, and if I hit delete it works perfectly fine. So there we are with a little bit of more validation. So if we see right here inside the code, what we had last time is that basically we can just tap on some numbers and add some operations as well, and there's kind of a little validation as well going along as we type all this stuff, right? So we can actually delete them as well, and so on and so forth. So what we want to do now is, as I said, when we want to calculate the result, we want to parse some text like this. So if we just console.log this text first, hit save, and let's just reload the app. What the heck does React sometimes just, does not reload on savings? Let me just manually reload here, right here, by hitting reload, and there we are. So now if we just take a look, like if we just say 21 plus 54, and what I'm gonna do is just press this equal to right here. Let's see what we have inside our console. We have 21 plus 54, right? So what we want to do now is basically calculate this, right? So this is easy, but with operations like doing like times 8 minus this divided by this, stuff like this, what we want to do is just follow a kind of a standard or something. Now there are, I guess, 2 standards. I'm not really sure. What I know which of is BODMAS, which is like you have to follow brackets first, then of, which is not really a mathematical operator right here inside our calculator, then division, then multiplication, then addition, then subtraction, right? So if there are brackets, you have to follow brackets first, and then just leave this, then division, then multiplication, then addition, then subtraction, right? So we can do that. So to do that, what we have is, the first way is basically there are 2 ways to calculate this text, right? So what we want to do is like, let's just say you might want to have like split the character with each character, or maybe like iterate over, yeah, splitting and iterating over each of the character like that. So now you're gonna say if character is your special character, something like this, or you can just use an array and test if the character is actually included in that particular array, then you want to do something, right? So this is a basic logical implementation of a calculator. But what we can do, since we are making use of React Native, and again, if you remember, we are running JavaScript, right? So we can cheat a little here. So what I'm gonna do instead of this, all this brainstorming and finding out what stuff goes where and aligning brackets and all that stuff, what we can do instead is make use of our old good but infamous friend eval. So eval is actually used to evaluate a value which is in a string, right? So if I try to eval this value right here, eval 21 plus 55, let's just say, you see that we get this. If I do eval of like alert, you see I get an alert. So eval is basically used to evaluate a string as a JavaScript code. You should never use this on user input, but we're going to use this on user input. I know, right? Because of two reasons. First of all, this is not a web application, so doing an eval of alert is not going to work really, because we have not made our app sophisticated enough to have JavaScript functions executed inside our Java running runtime environment, right? So this could possess a problem if we are kind of allowing anything to be typed on the keyboard and then evaluating it. But since we are restricting the user input to only numbers basically and these signs, we can pretty much hope that they're not able to type characters and kind of self-access them. So yeah, so it's I guess safe to do. So if I do like eval of text, so if I just console log this as well, so yeah, let me just comment this out for first. Let's just freaking reload this application. Enable live reloading. There we go. Basically, actually I just flashed my phone's ROM, so that's why I guess I lost some options here. So it's Android 8.1, quite impressive. It's actually a Resurrect Remix ROM, so if you have used that, it's kind of smooth till now, works awesome. So I'm really liking it. So yeah, and if I do like 22 times 11, and then if I just dismiss this equals to, and then if I go to like console, you see that we get 22 times 11 is equal to 242, which is in fact what JavaScript would tell you anyway, because that's the result JavaScript calculated, right? So what we want to do is now basically update this value inside our results, right? So what I'm going to do is say this dot set state, and I'm going to say actually, what do we call this? So we are kind of like saying that this is calculation text, so let's just name it that, calculation text, and there we go. So what I'm gonna do right here is again just initialize it for the sake of sanity here, and what I'm gonna do is just say that I just want to set the state. What the heck are we? This dot set state calculation text is eval, which is evaluating the input supplied by the user. So if I just dismiss this, and 66 plus 55 equals 121. There we are. And actually I just used dummy placeholder with 121 only, I believe. So that's kind of like, and it's completely random, right? So you see that it kind of works properly. Now there could be a couple of problems here. For example, if I just write plus and hit equal to, you see that we get unexpected end of input. That's because we are trying to evaluate something like evaluate 2 plus, right? So this is the problem. So obviously we cannot just leave everything on eval, so we need to do some sort of validation at our end as well before actually executing this function. Alright, so let's just get into the validation of this text before we actually hit it. And if we see what we have right here is that how we are calculating this is if we press equal to, we see that we call this function. But actually before calling this function, what I want to do is just validate the text as well. So to validate the text, what I want to do is just basically say something like this dot validate and this dot calculate result. So what it would do basically is that if this function returns false, then obviously the second condition for the AND would not run. So if this returns true, then this function would actually run. So we can safely just implement our logic right here. So again, we're gonna just get the text first. This dot state dot result text right here. Alright, so now as of now what I can just imagine as a edge case is that we just leave an operator right there. So if we do like something like if text.slice -1 is equal to like plus, or actually like we can just switch over it as well if we want. We can actually just create an array as well of these operators. There are so many ways to do a single thing in JavaScript sometimes. So text.slice -1 is equal to, or actually not equal to right here, case plus, case minus, case multiplication, case division, and we just return false, right? And just return true otherwise. Alright, there we go. So now what I want to do is just basically try out it again. So I dismiss, and I say let me just try it from here only. So if I just say equal to, I get 22. Very well. If I add a plus and then write equal to, okay, the app does not crash. That seems right. 55 equal to, that's great. So now if I try to do like something like 55 point and then do equal to, then also it does not crash. And mainly it does not because you can see whenever eval would crash, then so would your application. So see that actually in JavaScript numbers are not really it does not really bitch about if you leave a decimal right here. So you see that x is still 55 right here, even if you write 55 dot, right? So it's not a big deal. So yeah, that's basically it. That's how you would add a little bit of validation to your input field right here. So right now I have the regular calculator opened up, and right here is the calculator which we have, right? So we have a couple of things to do. First of all, in the UI we need to update the colors, so let's just do that real quickly. So right here, if we take a look where we are setting these colors and all, is actually inside our style sheet, right? Or basically the React styles. So what we want to do is just locate this yellow green columns and update them accordingly. So to update the colors, let's just do a quick Google search right here. Say calculator Android. Let's just leave this, we do not need here. Images, and let's just pick this one because we would be able to just extract the colors just like that. And actually this is a little trick I use. If you did not know about it, well, there you go then. So here it is, our hex value for the yellow part, there we go, and our hex value for the buttons on the right could be just let's see, instead of doing it a black, where's it, there we go. So instead of doing it a color white, are we doing it correct? Numbers is a view, we need to actually style the text, right? So actually not even the text, these numbers, right? So yeah, let's just do one thing. Let's just remove this color from here, and instead what we want to do is actually style.button text, which is what we want to modify, and give it a color of white just like that. And once we do that, you can see that we have basically our calculator ready, and instead of this red and green, let's just make it white and white. Hit save, and let's just add a key property here as well so that React does not complain about it. So for the key, we can just give it a key of nums of ij only, because that's unique. You have to keep your key unique and kind of, relatable as well. You can just throw in math.random. Sure, you can, but it's just preferable. So if you have got some sort of unique identifier in your data, then just go ahead and use that as the key. React just needs it. so that it has a track of all the elements, right? And here we do not have that, so just operations of I. Nope. This dot operations. What the heck am I even doing? This dot operations of I, and there we are. So this looks much more like a calculator. And why the heck do we have another warning here? Each child in an array or iterator should be a unique key. We are doing that, aren't we? Or does React expect us to do it here also? So let's just see. There we are, and I believe we should be fine now. Yep. Okay, so it looks like, kind of looks like a calculator. Not bad, I believe. But the obvious problem right here is that we start from here, the buttons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the actual calculator starts from the bottom. So it's kind of like okay. And again, we can just keep it del instead of d. That's actually just easy. You can just make these as constants as well at the top, so that you don't have to modify it everywhere if you change it once, right? So I just prefer to do that. So you can do that as well, but here, since it's a small program, we can just do a little bit of manual shifting, right? So now if we just hit save, so it looks much more like this, right? And we can do some sort of operations as well. And holy crap, so we have a white colored text here, so we need to update that as well. So where we are, let's see, here we are. Calculation text should be black, and same for the result text should be black. Hit save. There we are. 22 plus 55, what it is. Hey, it's 77, not bad. Can your calculator do it? 22 plus 55. Well, obviously this calculator does not really require us to press equal to, right? And actually pressing equal to makes it enlarged. So that's a task I want to give to you guys. Now detect how you would create a functionality like this. So obviously you have to make use of state variable here instead of like doing calculations when you click on equal to, right? So that you can update and change the state on a regular basis, how the text changes, right? Also try to make this font size a little bit bigger, this one actually, and remove the bold. It looks like it's bolded, so try to use a different font or thinner font and make it enlarged as well, and you would be basically good to go. So that's all for our React Native calculator application. If you liked it, then don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching.